Okay, so I hope you didn't read the title as which country is better, but which do I prefer? And I really wanted to start off by saying that because I definitely don't want it to come across as I'm saying that Belize is better or Barbados is better, because that's definitely not what I'm trying to do. So in this video, I thought it would be helpful for persons who are thinking of relocating, as I'm always doing, to share some information based on my experience and my perspective on which country I prefer for certain things. And I thought that it would be helpful to create these categories that I look for when I'm living in any country for what would make me feel happy, fulfilled, and like I can really settle in. So those 4 categories that I'm going to use for this video are cost of living, culture, food, and entertainment. So what is there to do in that country? So let's get started. So when I'm looking at cost of living, that encompasses a few things. Rent, obviously, or owning a home, purchasing food, getting around, entertainment. These are the general categories when I'm looking at cost of living. For me, I prefer Belize because the cost of living in Belize is literally half of what it is here in Barbados. Usually, generally, the price of whatever it is I'm purchasing here is doubled. And that's obviously for a lot of reasons, because Barbados imports a lot. It's an island, so they don't have a lot of natural resources like Belize does. So our cost of living for food and commodities is way lower, much lower. But then you also have to look at the other side of the coin. So cost of living is always balanced by the job market. So persons in Belize tend to get paid much less than what persons are paid in Barbados. So that's something you have to consider. You can live in Belize and have a very affordable cost of living, but you're not going to be paid as much as persons in Barbados. But then you also have to look at people are paid according to the cost of living here, but a lot of persons still complain that it's still really expensive. So I think if I had to kind of sum it up, the cost of living, I prefer Belize, because obviously who doesn't prefer someplace that's more affordable and easy on the pocket. So culturally, as it relates to the native culture, obviously Belize is more culturally diverse than here. I don't know what your preference is, or if that's even important for you, but for me, I tend to like places where there's a lot of culture, because that influences the language and the food and how people interact and all of that. And I find that's really exciting, and that makes you feel immersed and like you're in a different world. In Belize, it's way more culturally diverse for a few different reasons, because of our history, because of our geographical location. Here, the culture is different because it's an island. It was once a British colony, and like most British colonies, there is the influence of British culture and very little influence of the African culture that the slaves were able to practice and keep and pass down traditionally, which is very much the case for not just Barbados, but tons of other British Commonwealth countries, and specifically Caribbean countries. So in terms of that, the culture is not as diverse, but it's still very rich. So I feel like I'm able to experience Barbadian culture and appreciate it, as well as experience Belizean culture and appreciate it both equally. But when it comes to like the culture of interacting with friends and co-workers and family and any kind of relationship, I think that there is, again, a very distinct difference, because I find Belizeans tend to be warm and welcoming and very neighborly, and there's a sense of community, especially when you go into the villages and even sometimes in the urban areas. But here, the culture of engagement is not as friendly or as warm. If you're not into people being overtly friendly or overtly warm, Belize might not be your cup of tea. So it all depends. But personally, I would prefer a happy medium between the two of those. So food, I'm not even gonna pretend. I obviously prefer Belizean food because I grew up eating Belizean food, and I'm pretty sure in any country people will say that they like people will prefer the food that they grew up eating. And so I will always prefer Belizean food. One, because it's a mixture of what the world knows as Mexican food. It's very similar to a lot of different Latino countries, including Belize, which is in Latin America, which is in Central America. And I like that. I also like that in Belize there is the infusion of Afro-Caribbean food as well, plantains, rice and beans, stews and soups that are very African influenced because of our history with slavery. So I think it's just more a melting pot of food in Belize. The food here is not as diverse, but one very interesting thing about Barbados is that there are a ton of restaurants. I've never been to a place like Barbados in terms of it's a smaller country, a smaller population that has as many restaurants as Barbados does. So in terms of cultural food, I prefer Belize, but in terms of the variety of food, I would say that maybe I would prefer Barbados because Barbados has a ton of restaurants. So when it comes to things to do, both countries are equally on par. Because, like I mentioned, it's a tourism destination, so there are a lot of things being organized for tourists, which doesn't mean that if you live here, you can't take part because it's touristy. It's actually something to do. So I really like that about Barbados. In Belize now, there is a ton to do if you are into adventure. Belize is massive compared to here, so there are places to go on the weekends if you want to go to the islands, if you want to go to the rainforest, if you want to take a quick trip to Mexico or Guatemala. I often do that with my family back home. We would go to Quintana Roo for the weekend to shop or to spend the overnight and then come home. So you can travel very easily throughout Central America. And within Belize, there's also a ton of do. There's mountain, there's camping, there's zip lining, you could go scuba diving, you can do a lot in Belize. When it comes to organized events, I don't find that there is much accessible activities to do in Belize because, like I mentioned, Belize it's much bigger than here. So if I live in Belize City, and if there's something happening in San Pedro, or if there's something happening in Corozal or Cayo or Placentia, I'd have to really plan to be able to participate. In terms of what is there to do in Belize and what is there to do in Barbados, I find both countries there is a lot to do equally. My preference as it relates to these four categories, I find can be satisfied in both countries. So I don't have an outstanding preference for either. I'm also the type of person who's very easygoing, and I look for the best in whatever I'm doing and wherever I am. So when it comes to my preference overall, I would say that I don't have a preference. I don't think that any country is better than the other. I don't think that Belize is better than Barbados, and I definitely don't think that Barbados is better than Belize. I just think that each country has their own unique, special things to offer. So yeah, that's it for me today. Let me know in the comments if you've lived in Belize or Barbados. What are some of the things that you like about Belize or don't like about Belize, or what are some of the things that you like about here, Barbados, or don't like? I'd love to hear your experience, and I'll see you in my next one.